Hey, and welcome back to Be the Authority. Now, today's special guest is Dee Ludlow. Now, Dee is a great example of how he's being able to become the authority by doing rather than just by educating. And from his experience, he's also been able to really portray what it means to become a personal brand, but also to have a following that are genuinely interested and engaged in what you're doing. So, Dee, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here and appreciate the time.
Amazing. So, do you want to introduce yourself in a little bit more detail and also share with what you're working about right now?
Yeah, so my name's Dee. I've probably been in business since I was like 17. So a lot of ups and downs, a lot of startups, some fail, some went pretty good. And since then, just overall built a small presence online, and now more focused on the sort of mergers and acquisition side of stuff to scale through acquisition, as well as I have a small coaching program too.
I love it. So, talk to me a little bit about your journey getting here and what your personal brand did for you to get to where you are now.
Well, I think up until I was quite heavy in real estate a few years ago, and I think that up until then, my personal brand wasn't something that I was very focused on. And when I realized that I was looking for external investment, everybody kept telling me you need to start posting more on social media, and it was something that I sort of kept to myself. I'd only post if I was like on holiday. I wouldn't really post my day to day. And even I would say back then it wasn't like that big then either. And then when I started to post what I was doing, people get interested, and then I realized how powerful that personal brand was, because we've basically transitioned over the past like 5 to 10 years from the business being the authority online to the personal brand being the authority. So I feel that over that time, I've seen that transition, and people cared more about the individual rather than the business, and they went there first. So I started to realize the power behind it, and then moving from there, building a podcast and different things to not only reach out to new people, build a network, but also again establish the personal brand in this space too. And I've had no end of opportunities come from having a presence online, and I think it's quite easy these days to see through the personal brand. And the more transparent somebody is, I feel that it helps a lot, because there's obviously social media is a minefield. So
Yeah, I can
yeah.
imagine. And talk to me a bit more about that transparency, because I know that we covered this on our podcast, but there's a lot of educators out there who haven't, done it themselves, or there's a lot of regurgitated information. So, how do you think that someone can see that transparency?
I feel first and foremost, anyone can have just a good LinkedIn profile, right? We see it all the time where people are very good at writing, and they're very good at explaining what it is they want to be. So you can create a good like image from a profile, but I feel that you can start to see now through how active somebody is, right? So one of the things that I'm quite big on is not allowing the accreditations to give you limitations, because I feel that everyone's all about accreditations and numbers after the name, or letters after the name, when it comes to like LinkedIn. And I feel that LinkedIn's a great place, but I also feel that on LinkedIn, it's quite hard to sift through who potentially you could add value to and who could add value to you. So I feel that first and foremost, I feel online challenging your opinion and having a different, looking at a difference in opinion to other people helps a lot. But yeah, overall, I feel that being active and just being yourself, I feel that you can actually identify someone's true personality through it. And you can see, I think, quite easily when someone's putting on the show, whereas before it was quite hard to tell, just because everyone would have engagement. But then you start to see, well, testimonials is a good place to start, but just overall, just the engagement and what people say about somebody. I always find that a referral is better coming naturally and organically through someone else rather than trying to force it. And I feel that, that's when you find out who someone really is. And just overall, I think that before you start anything online and being an authority in your space, I feel that you do need to try and identify your personal target audience anyway. Try and have a look at how big the marketplace is for what it is that you want to do, and just diving in a little bit deeper to what it is you want to get from online, because people like to have an online presence, but there needs to be a reason for it. If you just want to do it sort of passively just to have a presence, that's fine. But if you're trying to use it to scale, meet new people, maybe find investors, I feel that you need to have some sort of plan or strategy. Otherwise, you're just going to be all over the place.
Yeah, and I completely love what you said as well. And you're practicing what you preach, right? You're putting yourself out there. And one of the platforms that you've recently taken to is YouTube. And as we discussed a little bit just before this started, why is YouTube such an important time right now to be getting on if you're not already there?
Well, I think that it's the place that people look for credibility, and because you have YouTube and Google, and the sort of the correlation between the SEO, when people search for something on Google, because of the YouTube correlation, that comes up too. So if someone says like, I don't know, I want PR, for instance, right? Where can I find PR? Then if you have a YouTube presence like yourself, then that those things are going to come up together. And I feel that as far as credibility goes, I've had people actually come up to me before I started my YouTube, and they've said, you're not on YouTube personally. I've done other podcasts and started to get it a lot. And I'm like, why aren't I on YouTube? And it was one of the things that in at the start of the first lockdown, I was like, I'm going to start, a YouTube channel. And I never did it. And I feel that definitely credibility, first and foremost. And I find it's a very hard platform to build on. So whereas Instagram, TikTok, and all the others, which are all great platforms, you can, I feel that it's not easy to build a following, but I think it's easier than YouTube. If you can get someone to subscribe to your videos and consistently come back and watch those videos, and you build a following on there, I think it's a lot harder. But once you have it, maintaining it to just being active, I think it pays a lot better dividends overall, regardless of whether you're monetizing it or not. I feel that there for credibility, it helps more than any other platform.
And I love what you said as well about being able to maintain it, right? Because sometimes you want to put so much effort in, and for example, you've created a podcast, but okay, and then what? Then what's going to happen? How are you going to maintain your efforts? So what's some tips and tricks you could share about actually retaining that audience once you built it?
Again, a plan. I feel that how often are you willing to post? So if you want to post every day, then it's gonna take a lot of content. If you want to post every 3 days, then you just have to be prepared, because what you don't want to do is, one, burn yourself out, but two, you don't want the quality of content to go. And I feel that if you overdo it, and you can start great, because people get a bank of content, maybe 2 or 3 weeks worth, and then the quality of go downhill because they feel that they need to just think of something. And I've seen some really good people, some of my most favorite people on YouTube right now. I've already seen the actual raw quality of their content start to drop, and these are huge people in the space right now. And I feel it's because they've given a lot of their good content out, and now because they're expecting it, they're just doing anything and thinking of anything just to put content out. And I feel that that's why podcasts help, because you can reuse a lot of content in podcasts. Plus, if you start asking the right questions, if you do have your own podcast, then the other person's going to reuse the content too, which is also good for you. But yeah, I think overall you have to maintain the quality of the content. If you want to maintain the audience, you need to keep giving value. And it is hard to keep coming up with ways to give value, but don't just overload it in the first couple of weeks and then basically not know what to do afterwards.
Yeah, I love it. And talk to me a bit more about that, right? How do you come up with creative ideas? How do you think, okay, that is going to be my next YouTube video?
So for me, I think of stuff in the day now. So especially for my shorts, I think of things. If I'm solving a problem in the day and I approach it a certain way, and I'm like, okay, right, that would make a good video. And then I'll do it. Even small things, like I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and he was telling me a story about his nephew, and his nephew was at a football tournament, and I made a short on this actually, and his nephew played in the tournament, and there was a young kid there that they were calling like mini Ronaldo. He was scoring all the goals, and they got to the final, and then both teams that win the final, this kid scored like 6 or 7 goals in the final, they won, and then and nobody won. It was sort of everyone has a trophy. So I made a video on it. It's like, look, I personally feel that there should be winners and losers, because I feel that losing helps you in life. Experiencing failure isn't very nice, and once you experience it once, you try your best not to experience it again, but you learn from it. So that just from having a conversation like a passively with a friend of mine, I was like, that's actually a good lesson that you could tell people, because day to day we're very ambitious. I know you're an ambitious person, so am I, and so one of the things that you mentioned in our podcast was you've never really struggled with self-belief, and I'm similar. So for me, but I know a lot of people do. So for me, I'm like, look, I know that a lot of the stuff that when it comes to wanting to achieve certain things, you need huge self-belief, and mindset's a big thing. But we overlook mindset because it's one of those things that people feel that's the easiest part. I can control my mindset, but realistically, a lot of people can't. I feel like gifted that I can, and I'm sure you do as well. I feel that's good, but I know a lot of people struggle with some of the small things. So working on your mindset's a big one. So first and foremost, if you've experienced certain things in life and you've taken something away from it that you feel other people could take value from, I think that's a good place to start. But always, if you're day-to-day problem solving and you have an expertise in a certain field, there's always going to be value that you can give to other people. It's just how you deliver it. And that's the hardest part, I feel, is having an idea, but knowing how to deliver the idea so people can actually use it themselves.
Yeah, and you're spot on with that, right? Because one of the things, and Gary Vee spoke about that, is document, don't create. And that's kind of the concept that you just spoke about, which is when something is happening any day in your real life, think to yourself, is that useful to share with somebody else? Will that genuinely help them? And if it is, you've got your YouTube video, you've got your YouTube short and something similar. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. But then you've also mentioned about actually doing it, right? Because everyone could be like, oh, I'm going to post one YouTube video a week, or I'm going to post on Instagram. And then, they haven't posted in like 3 months. And you're like, okay, so how do you create that mindset shift between, I know what I should do, I know what I could do, I'm going to go now, actually go do it?
Yeah. I think the best lesson comes from taking action anyway. So regardless of what it is you want to do, there's only so many courses, so many books, so many videos you can watch before you actually have to do it. So to shift the mindset to actually do it, the best lesson, even if you do fail, is just get on with it. And it is hard because the sort of the thought of failure isn't very nice, but you'll learn a lot from it. And like I said, you're not going to want to do it again. You're not going to want to fail again. So you get better each time. But yeah, I think that just the words taking action is so underrated, because it's like, oh, that's common sense. Of course. Well, a lot of people don't do it. And, we see these people that call their courses, fancy names, package them up to sell. And a lot of them pretty much have the exact same delivery. And the reason why they have the same delivery is because there isn't really a real secret sauce. Of course, people deliver the content better, so and you can relate to them more, so you may get something more from it. But if there's a way to buy a property, that's the way to do it. And of course, there's other things you can add to it. There's a way to buy a business, the same. If there's a way to get in front of people, this is the way to do it. And everyone have their own spin on it. But if you keep doing all these courses and never do anything with it, you're just going to be the smartest person on that topic in the room that has never achieved anything. So, like I said, in me, I wasn't somebody that left school and went through all the further education, and I was never that good at exams. But my strength, that was my weakness. My strength was I'm not scared to fail, and I'll just get on with it. So I made a lot of mistakes, but along the amount of lessons that I learned from it, and like I said, I didn't want to keep making the same mistakes. I feel that taking action is the best thing you can do, and don't push it to the side, because it's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I like to cover a little bit of the mindset stuff, just in case there is anyone who's that they should do it and they just don't. Now, let's dive into a little bit more about what you do, right? So you have your community. Talk to us about what you go through in that community.
So first and foremost, in 2020, when we had lockdown, I started to get quite lazy myself. I'm quite an active, outgoing person. And because I couldn't move or do anything, I just got really bored. So I found myself sort of doing things like watching TV more, which I never used to do. And I was like, I'm becoming I don't like who I'm becoming. And, so I basically called a few of my friends, said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to wake up 3 days a week at 5 a.m. and we're going to discuss business and let's see if we can help each other. Right. We started to do it. And then, as you know, people share it on social media. So more people joined. It got to a stage where there was way too many people on the call to have open conversation. So I sort of asked people, what you all do. One of the guys was doing like NLP. So I'm like, do you want to do a presentation on it? And it started to like develop from there. So in the 5 a.m. club community is more about the speaker on the day. So we have different speakers where they deliver value in what they do and people learn from it. We also have networking sessions too. So that's more about, I would say, either entry-level entrepreneurship or aspiring entrepreneur. Then our sort of mastermind program is more suited is a results-based program. And the reason why that even come around again is from people in the group saying, look, can you help me personally? And it wasn't something that I sort of set out to do. I like the coaching I wanted to be a coach at some point, but I thought I'll do that down the line, not yet. And then, I suppose the demand was there and people kept asking. So I took a few people on, and then from there, I was like, I'm only going to do this if I do it results based, because there's so many programs out there that you just buy and there's no sort of the aftercare is not the best. I wanted something that was very results based, that if you don't work hard, there's no point in you doing it. And we're not just going to do this and you just bleed money for no reason. So I made something that was very results based. It was crypto and then M&A related, both of them. But we talk about sort of the whole macro picture and all the other things too. We get some speakers on, but it's not so much about the speaker coming on telling us what they do at like the 5 a.m. club. This is like, look, if you're coming on, you're going to come on and you're going to deliver value based on a niche that we're talking about. So it's very different and results based in regards to both communities here.
Yeah, and I love that as well, because it was very organically grown, right? It came because people asked for it. It wasn't brought out of nowhere. And how about the M&A side? Just jump in to the kind of, I'd say, limiting belief that you can't buy a business, or that how could you buy a business if you've never bought it from the ground up? And I personally wish I learned about how to buy a business rather than starting so many myself. So Dee, talk to me a little bit more about that buying process.
So initially, so years ago, I've bought and sold businesses before I understood what M&A was. And I just thought this is just a hustle. And then when I started to really understand it, I was like, this is crazy. So when you start to, one of the things before I get on to M&A, some of the things that I really wish that I was asked as a kid. Now, my dad took me on a Rich Dad Poor Dad seminar when I was like 15. He's really he gave me the book. He really tried to get me into that mindset, and it helped a lot. But if I could go back and think, right, what would I have said differently if I could have, and if I was him? And first and foremost, when I was in school, the only lesson I liked was PE, right? That's all I cared about was sport. So when I was asked, like, what do you want to do when you leave school? It was like, I want to be a PE teacher, because that's the thing that I enjoyed, right? Now, someone said to me, like, look, what is it you want to be? No, what do you, if you could design your life, what would it look like? And back then, I probably would have said all the fancy stuff that, the supercars, loads of holidays and travel, etc. And then if someone said to me, okay, what is it you want to do? And I said a PE teacher. And then someone said to me, right, go and Google the ceiling salary for a PE teacher in the UK. And I know the figures because I've done this, right? And it's about 42 grand a year to 45 grand a year in central London, right? So I'm like, I'm from Wales. I know these are probably earning about 30K a year, right? Now, if someone said to me, look, that doesn't align with the life that you want, then instantly, when I was in like year 9, I would have probably chose different subjects, probably looked at it a little bit differently. If, I thought, well, I want this life, but this is the job. They don't really add up. So that's the things I wish I was asked. Now, the reason why I mentioned that was because I took a similar approach to be like, my figure and my target number and my target sort of lifestyle changed. I was like, this is my target. And now I don't really care so much about a monetary figure. It's more about convenience, but my monetary figure changed. I'm like, what's actually going to get me from A to B? Like, what are people doing to get to that sort of level of wealth? So I just Googled the 5 richest people in the world. Every single one of them was in business. No one was in property. No one was in anything else. it was business, right? And there was one outlier, which was Elon Musk, which was like more of a startup entrepreneur, even though he did buy the company Tesla, but it's technically a startup entrepreneur. All the rest has done it through acquisition. So I'm like, this is the only thing I need to be doing, right? If I want, and I looked at it and I was like, this is like a very gray-haired sort of industry. The way I looked at it, everyone was a lot older in the industry, and even a lot of the sellers that I speak to on a day-to-day basis now are a lot older. And until I speak, they're sort of, I know they judge me for my age. So I was like, this is what's going to get me from A to B. So initially I had to sort of take some education on it, learn about it. You know, I'm always happy to do it. I look at the best person in the space and the one I trust most based on their online presence, going back to what we just mentioned. And I'm like, right, let me see what it's all about. And so I did that. And then again, I thought I'm just going to take action. Took action. Then I built my own sort of framework of how I approach and the way I speak to them, which is going to be slightly different from what I was taught, just purely based on the fact that I'm a lot younger and I have to approach them differently, because instantly they look at you and like, where's the credibility coming from? Can you afford to buy my business? What expertise do you have? Can you get this done? Which is big questions in that space, right? A lot of these people have built a business over 20 or 30 years. They developed a culture inside the business. They got staff they care about. They want to sell, but they want to make sure that you're going to maintain what they've done, right? That they care about it, right? A lot of them do. So I had to sort of build like a framework for that for me personally, and then from there, you know, look at the target sector. Maybe I have a transferable skill set that would help in certain areas. Do I want to be an owner operator? Do I want to sit on top of the business and grow it and then exit to private equity? There's so many different ways that you can do it. And going through that learning process by speaking to sellers, you start to really naturally mold into the areas that suit you and the stuff that suits you. And obviously age is a big part of it too. But at the end of the day, you can scale so quickly in such a short space of time through acquisition and overcoming limiting beliefs. Like you said, like anyone can do it, right? Literally anyone can do it. Like, you know, we got someone in my group right now. He's 26 years old, right? The podcast is online actually on my YouTube channel. He's 26. He was basically an apprentice sort of electrician. And this January the 1st this year, we completed on a 7-figure acquisition for him. And they're not all unicorn deals and all no money down. This one actually was. And he was giving him about £250,000 a year profit. And he gets to decide whether he sits in the business or not, right? He decided to work in the business for 6 months. And he's grown the business. He's added stuff that, like, the previous owner was 74 years old. So he's added technology for a start. So, you know, and the business has done incredible. Like, you know, and so anyone can do it. He's 26 years old. Like, you know, before that, he had no skill set, never run a business before. So post-acquisition is obviously the hardest, 100%, because most people like overlook that. They're like, oh, we can buy the business. It's like, yeah, you have to own the business afterwards, right? Like, that's a different skill set again. But anyone can do it. Like, you know, it's the same as buying anything, you know, or doing anything. I think startups are harder because I've done many startups, and you start with no money, no customer list, no anything, no infrastructure, no staff. That's harder because you've got to wear all the hats. You have to learn different skills that you really shouldn't be learning because people are better than you. Whereas when you buy a business, like, right, I have the infrastructure, we have customers, we have cash flow, we have a presence, we have a brand. Okay, right. How do we now reach more people? How do we now get more customers? And you don't care about employing people that are better than you then. The problem is with startups, I feel, which, you know, I still love startups, but, you know, there's a lot of ego involved because, you know, people get very optimistic thinking that, you know, they have something that no one else has. But you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know, and another thing with startups is optimism usually gets smashed in the face by realism, unfortunately, because, you know, and it's happened to me loads of times. I'm speaking from experience. You're very optimistic thinking that your product or service is better than everyone's in the marketplace until you go into the marketplace. And then 3 months or 6 months in, when all the hype's died down, realism kicks in and you're like, right, now I have to develop a real good business with good infrastructure to have sustainability. That's when you start to realize, if you understand buying businesses, I should have just bought one with all this. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's mindset shift, right? You don't think about it. It doesn't come up. There's not educators, and in particular what you said, there's not many young educators as well. So where's a good place to start? I know that you have your community. If someone wants to get involved, what can they expect?
It's in our community is very take action based. So I get quite bored of video courses, like, because they're so readily available now and everyone has one. So I was like, I don't really want to create a video course, like an in-depth one. So we created 12 to 14 videos, but they're like 5 to 10 minutes long each. You just get through those videos. That gets you started. That's literally where you need to start. From there, we get you straight on the phone to sellers. So we have a certain way that we do our lead gen and create our deal flow. And within the way we do that, you're pretty much on the phone to someone within 2 weeks of starting it. And you, depending on how hard you want to hit the deal flow, is all automated the way we do it. But yeah, you could have calls every day if you want to go that hard on it. But like with anything, everything's volume based, right? Regardless of what industry you're in, the more calls you take, the more people you speak to, the more chance you have of buying a business. And it can happen fairly quickly, or it could take you a year or two. It all depends. It's hard. There's no metric to actually that you can measure when it comes to M&A, where when I was doing property, people was like, on average 44 offers, you get one accepted. That was sort of the way people was measuring it, where I've been trying to track and measure in M&A, and I just don't see how you possibly can do it. So it's very hard. So you just need the numbers, the volume. But to get started, I would say there's a lot of free stuff on YouTube where if you type in anything on YouTube, I think it's like we're talking about it, it's probably the best educational free platform in the world. So for me, it's like, go on there first. Yes, you have to try and sift out the good versus the bad, but if you just look at the basic stuff, you can get some base knowledge on something before you actually dive into the detail, and you see whether you actually is something you want to do or not.
Yeah, no, I love it. And hopefully some listeners here will be like, okay, cool, I'm going to go check that out on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I think it is massively under talked about. I have another question as well. How many women are within M&A?
That's a really good question. So I would say that it's quite male dominated. Almost every single seller I speak to are women. Some of the brokers that we talk to are women, but I would say almost every seller is a man that we speak to. So that's a really good point. We do actually have a few women in the program that are doing pretty good, and I feel that the reason why I feel that women do well is their approach. So I feel that one, the male ego is bigger when they speak to a man, because it's sort of like, oh, I'm the authority on the call. Whereas I feel that when is male and female is very different. But I also feel that there's different ways. So like when you're talking to a seller, rapport is such an important part, because if you don't have some sort of values that align, or there's no rapport or no common ground, it's very hard to have any conversation. And when it comes to negotiation, it just becomes very hard. So when it comes to male and female speaking, I think is very different, because the emotions are different. So yeah, it's a good question, but I definitely feel that there's a more male dominated industry, especially at the small to mid-market business level. Definitely.
Yeah, interesting. I thought that answer would be something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of the online, M&A coaches or educators are male, and same within the tennis space. There's hardly any females there.
Yeah.
Well, Dee, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners and viewers connect with you on a deeper level?
So I would say I'm on LinkedIn. My name Dee Ludlow. YouTube is now sort of the place, so I'm started to post quite a lot of content. You can see mine and Sabrina's interview on there. There's 2 parts as well. So YouTube, Instagram, where I was mainly at before I started moving to YouTube. So they're probably the LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, and it's just my name on all 3.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.